Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. Hope you're all doing very well. I was going to say very well and welcome, but it doesn't make much sense, does it? No, it doesn't make much. I hope you're all doing very well. Tonight we are welcoming back a legend in the paranormal, an author extraordinaire, historian, owner of Amazing Hull Tours, and a man who came to Scotland about a year and a half ago, and his only mission was to find a Highland cow. Mike Covell's back. He's there. There's Mike over there. Sorry. I had to bring up the Highland cow because I mind
I've actually got one now in my office.
Did you find one eventually?
Yeah, so I do have a Highland cow. So it's such a beautiful place in Scotland. I'm hoping to get back soon. It was just gorgeous. Absolutely eaten alive by the midges, but well worth it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was well worth it. It was so beautiful.
Do you not get midges in England?
Yeah, we do, but not like that. They tend to just fly around. They don't tend to land on you and eat you alive. So when we stayed near Loch Ness, they were just all over your skin, 24/7. I laughed because one of my friends, he's quite elderly anyway. He went into the van, came out and had a full balaclava on his, and it was a really warm day. I mean, we was in shorts and t-shirts. He had this full balaclava on his head because it was just getting on his nerves that much. And then he went and bought a hat with a mesh. So it was it was easier to hang around with him. He didn't look like a nutter.
I think using branches or something sticking out your heads or something.
I discovered quite early on that certain types of trees they don't like, and we'd set up where we were eating. We'd set up some tables underneath these trees, and I noticed that when we went for food, that the midges never came. So I cut off a few branches and stuck them in my hat, and was just walking around with bits of branches sticking out, and they didn't bother me at all. So eventually the other lads started walking around with branches in their baseball caps and whatnot. It was funny.
Okay, I mean, you did the show. Rosie was on the other set. Sarah's saying, "Oh, hi, B." She's watching. I'm a celeb, but we're not going to that. Rosie was on. We're talking about it. No, I mind many years ago, we went up to Loch Goylehead and we were staying at a kind of scout centre, and we plagued with midges, but we kept the windows shut. But we went out one night and we came back in, the windows were open and the place was swarming, and we says, "Who opened the windows?" And one of the guys says, "I opened the windows because there was midges in here and I opened them to let them out."
Fun.
But they all decided to come in. I was captured by our 8-year-old. I don't know you weren't, because she's trying to cover it up. Sarah's I'm a celeb fan as well. She's just trying to cover it up. You know what I mean? But don't come up to Scotland now because it's like minus something up here now. Yeah. Absolutely. Hence why I've got the hoodie on. Usually
I've got my hoodie and a nice thick jumper tonight rather than shorts and t-shirt when we usually do this.
Oh. So that's why I've usually got shorts and t-shirt on, but the shorts are firmly packed away in the cupboard. But anyway, it's been some time since we had you on, young man.
It has been a while, yeah.
I was saying that I looked for the Shadow Paranormal last week. I was saying that, sometimes you just lose track of time.
Yeah.
You don't do it intentionally, but you just kind of lose track of time in a days, a week, a month, and before you know it, I've not spoke to so and such for weeks or months. Do you know what I mean? And how's your other half, by the way?
Yeah, no, everything's all right. Everything's good. It's not that cold here. I mean, it's cold, but it's not that cold. Everything's good. It's been a crazy year. Yeah, back to work.
Good. So you've been up to quite a wee bit. You were telling me before we came on. So let's get through what you've been doing, because you own Amazing Hull Tours. So, tell us a wee bit about that.
So the idea behind the tour company was to create a tour for children, and that history is changing all the time. So by using digital technology, I can show them where these places were. And it really took off. I ended up taking out lots of schools, primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, university, students and things like that. And then I expanded, and now we do over 40 different walking tours in Hull and East Yorkshire. We cover a town called Hessel, which is to the west. We cover locations across East Hull, locations around the city centre, places in Beverley, which is a town to the north, and places out in Sutton, which is a little village to sort of the northeast. And they're really popular. We get booked for private parties and corporate events. So as well as doing that, I offer lectures. So I do over 50 different lectures covering all aspects of Hull's history. And I get to do them quite a lot in schools, colleges, university, a lot of community groups, private groups and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'll travel around doing them, and I love them. I really enjoy doing them because you get to meet loads of lovely people. And then as well as that, this sort of the research arm where I do genealogy research for people, family trees, property research, all that sort of stuff. And then there's the writing, which has been...
I was going to ask the book total.
Right now it's over 150.
I think the last time we spoke, you just broke the 100.
Yeah. So I've been very busy. I started a book this week. I started writing it and researching it. I started writing and researching it on Friday last week. I spent most of Saturday typing, and it's currently on 32,000 words, 33,000 words. And it's what? Is it Tuesday? So, not a bad word count for a weekend. And that's on top of during the weekend as well. I've had tours and meetings and all sorts.
There's Laura in Heidel, and Tiana, that's her daughter. She's saying hello as well.
Yeah.
Sarah watching I'm a Celebrity. I can go there again. So, 150 books, right? I had trouble writing one.
Yeah, I just love writing. I love just escaping with an idea and going away and researching it, and just you start writing, you just get carried away.
I used to write. I'm going back 20, 30 years. A long time ago, I used to write, and I tried writing a screenplay. And as you just says, you get carried away with it, and every day I didn't go anywhere. I never sent it to anybody, but I enjoyed writing it. But it's like you get into a different world. Yeah,
I found that. It's like a form of escapism. I have an issue where I don't know when to stop when I'm writing. I will write and write and write and write until it's too big, and then I have to split it in half because I've produced such a big thing. And that's how I started out. I planned on writing a single book, and it was too big to publish, so I had to split it down into a couple of smaller books. And when I say it was too big to publish, the smaller books were still sort of, give you an idea. The smaller books were still, that's it. That was like 3. Well, in print, that's over 500 pages. So it's a bit of a beast, is that one. So the idea was to split them down into smaller books. And at the minute, I've been working on a series of true crime books, which chart the history of murders in Hull and across Yorkshire. And I started off with that one. I just wanted to write a book about Hull murders, about the history of Hull murders. But they were too big. The case files were just too big. So one book became 2, 2 became 4, and now it's a full series where there's about 30 books in that series. And when I say books, I mean each one's about 250 pages long. So the decent sized books. They're not little booklets; they are proper full-length books. And I have an issue where I think they're finished, and I'll go to the archives and find new stuff and continue and keep doing that until I've got more books. So, but I love that aspect. I love the research side of it. At the minute, I'm working on a book about the dark side of Hull Fair, or Hull's fairs. Hull annually had a number of different fairs through the years. It had one called the Drypool Feast, which was held during August every year. And they had one called Hull Fair, which has been going on since 1297, sort of during the reign of Edward I, and continues to this day. They have that every year. And it's Europe's biggest travelling fun fair. It's massive. And when you go to these places, there's lots of joy and merriment and flashing lights and beautiful food. But there's actually quite a dark side to it, with lots of deaths, lots of murders, lots of suicides. There was a case I was researching the other day where a guy went to the fair, got off the train and was hit by an oncoming train and just exploded into pieces. And then there's the crime and criminal element. So there was kidnappings, assault, pickpockets. But one of my favourite stories was they had a thing called Drypool Feast, which they held every year in August. And this was it was basically a place. Originally, it would have been planned out as a place where people go to eat and drink. But then certain amusements start coming in. And they used to have shooting galleries. So gentlemen would go and get very, very drunk and then go on these shooting galleries. And the amount of people that got shot was phenomenal. One man was killed. He got shot and was killed. And eventually the police turned around and said, we think it's because we're letting them drink and then we're letting them shoot, which is common sense. But at that time, I don't think they saw that correlation for quite a few years. And eventually they cracked down on it and stopped doing it. And that the fair no longer exists anymore. But Hull Fair's still going. And like I say, it's got quite a dark history. Tonight I was researching some of the... it's awful, but over the years they've had people that are very tall, very short, very wide, and very ugly. And these sideshows, the history of them I've been researching, and the people behind these stories. And there was one tonight, she was described as, she was described as Britain's ugliest woman, or the ugliest woman in London.
Really?
And she was brought to Hull Fair in the 1920s to be exhibited, and people were attracted to come and see her. And then the following year, another guy got in touch and said, "Well, look, I've got your stall has the ugliest woman in Great Britain. My stall, which is just opposite, has the ugliest woman in the world." So there was always this one-upmanship between the shows, and it's just awful because a lot of these poor people, they were. A lot of them were misused. A lot of them were used for money. There was stories of sideshow folk getting ripped off, not being paid the right amount of wages and stuff like that. And then on the flip side of that, there was sort of the criminal element, which I found fascinating. Pickpockets. In the 1920s, there was a massive outcry because they wanted something banned from the fair because they said it was really, really dangerous. And it was confetti. Like, just confetti. Like, they were saying confetti is such a dangerous thing. And I thought, how can confetti, something that we use at weddings and stuff, how can that be dangerous? And it transpired that the type of confetti they were using was getting into the mechanicals of the vehicles on the fairground rides. So fairground rides would break down, they would malfunction. But then if you've got confetti flying all over, people can't see. People would choke on confetti. And at the time, they were putting wood shavings into confetti. And these stories of people getting, these confetti cannons would go off, hit people, and basically knock them out and send them to hospital. And people were getting maimed by confetti. So in 1922, there was a massive outcry to get rid of confetti at Hull Fair. And it's just crazy when you think about it now, because it's something that we use quite a lot in,
just as you say, weddings and, a load of other kind of stuff as well. But so did it get banned?
Yeah, they banned it in the end. Basically, towards the end of the 1920s, a young lady was quite badly injured. And what had happened was, I don't know if it was like wood shavings in the confetti, but they'd fired these wood shavings into the air, and she'd looked up and, oh, beautiful, and swallowed a load of it, and some had gone up her nose, and she ended up in hospital. She nearly died. So that was the year where all the showmen got together and said, look, we can't do this anymore. We need to get rid. But there was other stories as well. At one point, they used to have monkeys. They had quite a lot of... I remember as a kid, you used to be able to get your photograph took with monkeys. And you'd basically have this little capuchin, and it would sit on you, and it'd be dressed up in a little outfit with a hat on. And but the stories of them getting loose and attacking people, and then when they got loose, they would try and have to capture them. And the stories of the hunters going around with shotguns and rifles and stuff, trying to hunt monkeys in the city. So that was quite they ended up banning monkeys after that point. And then the most recent one that I recall was goldfish. A lot of the stalls used to give, as a winning prize, you'd get a goldfish in a little plastic see-through bag.
I mean, right?
Yeah, and you'd take it home. It'd last for 24 hours. It'd stink the house out. It'd die. And I remember as a kid, my dad would come home with every old fair. He'd come home with goldfish. And within a day or two, they just couldn't survive. So we'd have a little funeral. They'd get flushed down the toilet. And he'd say, "We're never getting them again." Then next year, he'd win them again. I was charting the story of them when they came into play, how they came into play, why they came into play. And basically, they banned them. The RSPCA just said, you can't do it. It's cruel. And one year they sort of discussed it, and then the next year they said, that's it, we're not doing it anymore. So that was quite interesting. But people just don't realise how dark these fairs, these travelling fairs are.
They don't, because, they go to the travelling fair, and I mean, I've done it as well. You take the kids along, and it's all, rides and different games, win a teddy bear or whatever, and popcorn, or the rest of it. But you never think, I know I've never thought it until now. The story behind it, kind of basically the dark side, you know what I mean? So I think I'm going to think twice if we go to another fair now. But
I think you're quite safe. Yeah, I think you're quite safe today. I think it was more in the old days. I just think that back then there was no health and safety. So there's stories of kids getting run over by vehicles and rides hitting people, and there was just no health and safety. Whereas today there's a little bit more. There's a lot more stuff there to protect you and your family and things like that.
That's true. Plus, as these days, as you were saying, the ugliest women in Britain, the ugliest women, you wouldn't get away with that these days.
No, definitely. Some of the descriptions as well of some of the sad shows, some of the people that were invited, the descriptions nowadays you wouldn't even be able to put them on social media. You'd get a warning and get a ban, and you'd be kicked off for posting words like that. But back then it was all the rage, There was posters with these things on and stuff like that.
It was the same with these mediums and fortune tellers back then as well.
Yeah, I've not at the minute. I've not dipped my toe into that side, but I will be, because I do know that there was in the 1980s there was a big outcry locally because there was a priest who basically said it was the work of the devil. In the 90s we had the Satanic Panic. So again, it was brought up then in the 90s, where people were saying, these stalls are the work of the devil, and it's a gateway to Satanism and all this kind of stuff. So there have been over the years a few outcries in relation to it, but it's just a matter of tracing the history and going back to when they first came and why they came and who it was and so on and so forth.
I think they were more popular going way back. Like the 1920s, start of the 1900s, 1920s, all that kind of thing. Because obviously mediumship and spiritualism started no long before that in America. So when it came to the UK, it kind of just exploded. Spiritualism exploded in the UK, You know yourself, mate, all these people, I'm a medium, you know, these people who lost somebody and thought, well, maybe I can talk to my father, my mother, whoever. And so to have them in fairs, travelling fairs, I'll start again, have them in travelling fairs, it would just have been a big cash cow for these mediums.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, locally, it was sort of the First World War. There was stories in Hull in the 1860s of fraudulent mediums. There was the Humber Street table tipping scandal, which was in 1863, which made international headlines around the world. And that was a lady called Mary Heroliage, and she basically said that she could communicate with hundreds of thousands of spirits. And for a small fee, you would go into a parlour, you'd put your hands on the table, the lights would go out, she'd pass a message on from a loved one, and when the lights came on, your pockets would be empty. And people contacted the police, and it was found out that she was employing pickpockets. And she was taken to court for that. And she said, basically, I can communicate with thousands of spirits. So the judge said to her, if you can prove it in court, I'll let you off. And of course she couldn't. So she got fined quite heavily and went to prison. So as early as that, there was stuff going on. And that area was where one of the original fairs was held around that area. But then in later years, during the First World War, there was a big explosion of mediumship in Hull, where people would go for things like spirit photography. Mm-hmm. And if you lost in Hull, we had something called the Hull Pals, which during the First World War, most of the streets in Hull sent people to join. And the Hull Pals was just another name for the East Yorkshire Regiment, and they called it that because it was, you was there with your friends basically, and your neighbours and your family. And because a lot of them didn't come back, people would start going to mediums, they would start going to spiritualist circles and stuff like that in a bid to communicate with loved ones. But then spirit photography really came in the early 1900s, and just at the top of our street was a photography shop, and he claimed he could do photographs with your loved one in the background and stuff like that. And what's quite interesting about that, it was bombed in the Second World War, so the building's gone. They've rebuilt on it, and the current shop that occupies that shop has since reported a lot of paranormal activity. I was in there just this week, and she was saying, like, we've had bang, we've had clattering, we've had what sounds like footsteps in the ceiling. They're convinced. And I said, well, funnily enough, and I told them the story, and they couldn't believe it. They said, how come we never knew that? I said, well, I've published it in books and stuff like that, but unless you read them, you won't know.
Are you going to any chance of a wee investigation there for yourself?
Oh yeah. They've asked us to go in. They've asked us to they want to do a staff night where the staff from the shop have us go down and investigate and stuff like that. So it's a very real option. I just don't, because it's quite it's only 2 rooms. Mm-hmm. It's a front of house type shop and a rear of house type stock room, and it's not very big. But it'll be quite interesting to see it on a night when it's really dark, because it sells clothes, bedding, furniture, and it sells books and stuff like that. But the shelving's quite high, so when you're in there, it can be quite claustrophobic because you can't sort of see what's round the corner unless you walk round the corner. So that'll be interesting to see what that's like. But yeah, they've already said they'd like us to go in.
Plus, we'll probably put their staff at ease, if you go in and you find out who it is,
I think that, yourself when you meet someone and think that the property's haunted, they always go with the negative side. They always think, what if it's a murderer? What if it's a demon? And all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and we go in and just basically say, look, we just think it's, someone that's lived here or worked here in the past. They just want to be acknowledged. There's nothing sinister or anything like that.
It's like your local train station. We did that about 2 years ago. We investigated it, and down the stairs is a bakery. It's a bakery now, and it's 2 girls that work there, and they kept reporting that they were hearing doors opening and shutting, footsteps, etc. All the usual kind of bits and pieces. But it turned out that where the bakery was, it used to be staff quarters. way back, I was in the 1800s. That's where the staff lived in. So I say to them, what time? Because these girls are in there for, like, say, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I says, what time does it usually? Oh, it's usually first thing in the morning we get here. So I thought, so I said, well, what you probably find is it's residual, because maybe that time of the morning is when the staff would have been getting up and getting organised to start work. So maybe what you're hearing is the staff, they're still going about their daily kind of routine, but they're not aware of you, and they're no, it's not threatening in any way or whatever. And I said, oh, I possibly, and it seemed to, it's not if we were going to try to fob them off. We did investigate down the stairs, but get more activity up the stairs than down, but we did do down the stairs. Didn't get a lot of activity. But as I said to them, it's probably a residual. It's just them still doing their thing. And it seemed to put them at ease a wee bit. But as you say, people automatically think, oh, negative, demonic, Satan's coming to get us, they've watched too many horror films and, or the rest of it. And at the end of the day, it's probably 95% is probably something totally different. I mean, we've never encountered anything demonic to this day. I'm not saying they don't exist. I dare say I do believe they exist somewhere, some kind of dimension, realm, whatever you want to call it. We don't do the demonic side of it. But we've encountered grumpy spirits. Sarah's been, Laura and me, we've been told to F off, and Sarah's been called quite a choice few names.
I've had that. I've been told to F off a couple of times, but nothing what I'd consider evil or demonic or anything like that. So
it's amazing the amount of people who just jump on the demonic wagon, and you probably encountered many over the years, and then you get these teams will go out and say, that's demonic, there's a demon here. Aye. And they go, can you smell that? That's sulphur. I can smell that sulphur. And they feed each other. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen that. A lot of it, I think, is just laziness. That they're not willing to go out and do the research and spend time in the archives to find the real people that lived there and died there. And instead of going and doing that research, they just say, oh, it's demonic. And I've seen that time and time again with groups that will not go and do the legwork. They won't go into the archives. They won't go and sit and research. They'll just come out with these pathetic stories, and you can, if you go to the archives, you can find real people and real events and real names and real tragedies and things like that. Mm-hmm. But people just won't do it. They're just lazy, I guess.
I totally agree. They're not there, or either they're not there, or they're wanting to make themselves look big. We faced the demon and won. We exercised the demon. We took him for a walk. Basically, that's the only exercise you'll be doing. It's going for a walk, probably. So I mean, and it gets annoying. A lot of it's funny. There's a lot of funny stuff that yourself in the paranormal. And you're on TikTok, you've probably seen them. These people, they claim to have contacted big celebs through the spirit box. And there was that guy that fell through the hotel room a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember his name. The singer guy.
Yeah.
I think he was in One Direction or something like that. No disrespect, I can't remember his name. But it was all over the place, And there was a guy on TikTok the other day. I've contacted Liam Payne. That was it. I think it's Liam Payne. I've contacted Liam Payne. He's here. He doesn't know what happened, how he fell, or where he is. And you think, do you know what I mean? It's a load of...
Yeah. No, I've seen it quite a few times with quite a lot of celebrities. Or they'll say the names come out. But chances are, if you tuned into a radio, the name will come out because everybody's talking about it. So it's going to be uncountable. Yeah.
I'd never heard of the guy. I was Sarah tell me who he actually was. I'd never ever heard him. I mean, so you do your whole tours. You've done 150 books. I just find that mind-boggling. How do you choose your subjects for your books? Do you never run out of stuff?
it's just a lot of it. So, as someone who reads a lot and as someone who spends a lot of time in the archives, I often find gaps where people have not. They've maybe spoken about it, or they've not included it. So I'll go away and research it and think, well, do you know what? There's enough there for a book. In Hull, we've had, I think there's been about 15 different books on Hull murders, but they all cover the same murders. They all cover the same cases time and time again. And one of the things I thought growing up was I'd heard of other cases, lots of other cases that were in these books. So I went to the archives, and at the Hull History Centre, they've got an A to Z index it's a card index with loads of names in. So I went through that and found loads of new cases that weren't included in any of these books. And then I went through the newspaper archives, and it was just a case of slowly going through every single report on these murders. There was hundreds and hundreds that weren't included. Just last week, I gave a lecture at a college on unsolved Hull murders between 1800 and 1870, and there was lots. You know, the students were blown away, the teachers were blown away, and they were mainly children. You know, a lot of it was infanticide where parents had killed the kids and stuff like that. But there was lots, and these were just the unsolved ones. These weren't even the solved ones. These weren't the ones where they've got a suspect, and you know, so there was loads and loads of cases that were ignored and which weren't talked about. And then you'd get stories from other people. You know, people would contact you and say, "We've heard this or we've heard that." One of the things that we have locally is this kind of there's a real history, but there's a fake history. And in this narrative, this fake history, over the years, we've had people come up with stories. We've had people, and it's like Chinese whispers. You know, my granny's auntie's sister's mum said this story. Can you have a look into it? And I'll go away and look into it and find that it's not quite true. And I'll find the facts and I'll get everything. I'll type it all up and send it back to them and say, this is actually what happened. And I get lots of families coming who have an ancestor that has been murdered, but they're not quite sure what's happened, or the family don't want to talk about it. And they'll come to me, I'll go away and research it and end up with, 60, 70 pages of research. And I'll say to them, there's enough here to write a book. And they'll say, well, why don't you go do it then? So I will. Yeah. So there's stuff like that. And it's just a case of going through the archives and having that sort of motivation to sit there for hours and hours on end, going through all these reports. And
I watch a lot of the true crime stuff. Laura does as well. But Sarah and I, it was Laura that told us about it. The limbs in the lock killer. No doubt you've heard him. I'd heard him. I didn't know a lot about him. I knew his name and what have you. I knew that he came from Kilmarnock. Well, that's where he was caught. That's where he ended up living. But we watched, there's a documentary, BBC iPlayer or something that's on. And it says, I knew roughly the story, the outline, but we watched the documentary and didn't realise just, how bad it was.
Yeah.
And you think, how did this guy get away with so much for so long? And he was convicted of killing this other guy, and he got locked up for it. But then 2 years into the sentence, he was released on a technicality. But even though they knew he was a killer, they released him onto the streets. And people were saying, how can you release a killer on a technicality? The guy's done it. And he just went out and started doing his stuff again.
Yeah.
And it was quite shocking exactly what this guy done. As far as I know, he's still locked up to this day. But I watch a lot of true crime, and there's some screwed up people in this world. Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons was that I wanted to do these was because back in sort of the late 90s, early 90s, there was a lot of paranormal groups investigating locations around the city, and they were claiming it was haunted because there'd been a murder there. And this same group had gone to about 20 or 30 different venues and said there's been a murder here or multiple murders here. So I wanted to research those venues. So that's how it started, really, that I sort of would go and fact check these other groups. And I found out that around about 99% of the time they were full of crap. There was no murders at the venues or anything like that. But then it led me on to thinking, well, do you know what? Maybe it's a good idea to research these murders and give these poor victims a voice. So that's what I did. And that series is more or less completed now. It's more or less finished and ready for publication. But it's been fascinating to go through all these old reports. And I've been travelling all over doing it. There's a street in York where I'm not going to say where it is because I've got a book coming out on it. But on that street alone, there was 6 or 7 murders. There was 3 or 4 cases of baby farming. There was a lot of very, very dark history. And because it's York, a lot of the properties still exist. And a lot of the properties have reported activity. And I've had the pleasure of visiting that street in the last couple of years, 6 or 7 times. I've had the pleasure of staying in a couple of the properties. And there is an atmosphere. But when you walk down that street during the day, you don't see that. It's a beautiful shopping street. It's very picturesque. It gets a lot of tourists. There's lots of nice places to eat and drink and shop. There's a lot of new builds and modern flats and stuff like that. But when you look back at its history, it's unbelievable. So much darkness taking place.
It's like the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. The way you described that street, that's with the Royal Mile, yourself, it's a beautiful street, plenty of shops, bars, all the rest of it, thousands of tourists. Every year I wander up and down there, you get the fringe it's on and all the different things. But when you look back at its history, which you've covered quite a wee bit in the past couple of years, whatever, and there's a lot of dark history. You've Birkenhair, you had the plague, the amount of murders that happened there. There's so much executions that took place, up at St Giles and done at the Girth Cross as well, the Tolbooth prison, of course. There's so much history there that people don't realise. We had Nicola for Whispering Souls Paranormal. We went there at Halloween night and we showed her some places and told her. One particular bit was the brass bricks that are surround St Giles Cathedral, and I said, that's the outline of the old Tolbooth prison. She said, I didn't have a clue. I've walked over them, but I've never ever known what they represented. I said, well, that's if you look at the shape, that's the shape of the old prison that used to sit here. And the heart of Midlothian was the entrance to the prison, and she didn't have a clue. But as you say, during the day, it's a beautiful place at night as well, But it's the history. But I know what you mean about teams. And they'll say there was X amount of people murdered here and there, and they make it up as they go along. And one that springs to mind, it's not to do with murders, but it's the vaults in Edinburgh. One of the sets of vaults in Edinburgh is a stone circle. And a team that, we know of them. We watched their investigation they done there, and they went into this stone circle. They were saying, it's fire and brimstone, and I'm not stepping into the circle because it's evil and there's sacrifices being done here. I'm getting witches, and the media was going nuts. Turned out that the circle was put there in 1984, and it was just put there for decoration because they had extra bricks left over when they were renovating the other vaults. And the guy says, do you want these stones? And the guy that owns the vault says, aye, and he put them. So I'll put a circle in one of the rooms. And that's it. Since 1984, it was hundreds of years ago. There was babies thrown in here and into the fire. And not that wasn't because it wasn't there, hundreds of years ago. But it annoys you. It's laughable, but it annoys you at the same time.
Yeah.
If they're going to tell a story, at least there's some truth in it, if no more truthful. Aye, there'll be bits and pieces missing, you know, and you can maybe ad-lib a wee bit, you know, but don't be outrageous with it, you know, don't say Satan came up and danced, you know, whatever bollocks it is, you know what I mean? So the lectures that you do, how did you get into doing them?
So way back, it must have been about 2007. I was approached by a local library that was like a heritage centre that was all self-funded. It's run by volunteers. They were desperate for funds at the time, and it was at a time where I'd completed loads of history and loads of research into Jack the Ripper. And I said to them, how about I put together a Jack the Ripper lecture? I'd give a lecture in here. You charge on the door and you keep all the profits and put all that towards the library. And so they agreed on that. And it was massively popular. It sold out, raised a lot of money for the library. And then other people contacted me and said, will you come and do that lecture here? So I ended up just going on tour with it. And to this day, people still ask me to give that lecture. And again, I realised there was gaps. There was stuff that, excuse me, there was stuff that was missing where people just weren't talking about it. So I created lectures based around those stories. So there was, I do a lecture on World War II. I do a lecture on World War One. I do lectures on Victorian Hull, lost pubs, lost churches, lost cinemas, lost theatres, Victorians, Georgians, all sorts. And I have kind of the technology I use, I can mix and match. So people will come to me and say, well, we like ghost stories, but we like a bit of dark history as well. So I can put a little, bits and bobs in. And they just really took off. And I ended up travelling around the UK. I went to London a couple of times. I spoke to the Ghost Club in London, which was lovely. I spoke at the Jack the Ripper conference. And people really enjoy them. And in sort of the last year, I've had clients that will come to me from big major organizations and say, we would like you to give to our clients a monthly lecture, and then maybe do a lecture at the beginning of the month and a tour in the middle of the month, and we do that all year round. So I get clients, so you see regular people, and at the minute I have clients where I go to their venue. A lot of the lectures at the minute I do in the Guildhall in Hull, which is beautiful, magnificent, really, really nice. I go to a lot of schools, colleges. At colleges, I do for NVQs, GNVQs, and stuff like that. BTECs. They do leisure and tourism or travel and tourism. So I go there basically and just talk about being a tour guide. And it's great, and I show them all the planning that goes into it, your health and safety, your legal aspects and all that. And the students, they love it. They really enjoy that. And on a Wednesday, I do a local history class where I go to a local college and talk about local history, but the class is just for fun. It's not for you don't get any accreditation at the end. It's just what students want to do as like a spare lesson. And I go in, and at the end of every lesson, I say, what do you want to do next lesson? And they pick the subject, and I go away and I research it and come back with a presentation for them. And each lesson lasts an hour, but we do 45 minutes of the lecture. And then for the last 15 minutes, we'll have a discussion, and people will share their own stories. And every week, I went in thinking it would all be local history. And every week, they've come up with, we want to talk about local ghosts. We want to talk about local murders. So it's a bit darker than what I planned. But the kids love it. The teachers love it.
You find that, but it's. I mean, what I say, I'm going to say, just go back to what you were saying about you let them choose. I think that's a brilliant idea. Because I mean, we've all been to school and all the rest of your teachers. Right, today we're going to talk about whatever, and you're sitting there, right, okay. But if you let the students, what have you, choose something that they want to hear about, then you're involving them, you know, two, you're showing them that you care about what's going up here with them, and three, it makes them look forward to it. So next week we're going to talk about, you know, Henry VIII. Can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. And so I think that's a brilliant way to do it. But as you say, you know, when they come up with what here about the paranormal, what here about Dartmouth, it's amazing the amount of people that are into the paranormal. I no doubt you found this, but they'll not admit it.
Yeah.
Until they get that little nudge.
Yeah.
For somebody.
I had a talk last night with some clients from a local hotel, all the staff. It was like a staff night out, and at the beginning of the night I said, who believes? And about 3 put their hands up. And I said, who don't believe? And about 3 put their hands up. And I said, who's unsure? And the rest of the group, which was quite big, put their hands up. And by the end of the night, they were jumping at things. You know, at one point a dog barked, and they all freaked out. At another point, a car went by and bipped its horn, and one of the ladies jumped. And I said to her, if you don't believe, why are you so scared? And she said, just the atmosphere, just the stories that you're telling and stuff like that. And by the end, they absolutely loved it. We had a really nice night. They were all... the way I tell my stories, I'm quite sort of... I take the mickey a lot. And they loved that. They thought it was really fun. And, you know, they had a really good evening. It was nice to take them out. They really enjoyed themselves. But yeah, by the end of the tour, I think there was a lot more believers. And like you say, I think a lot of them did believe. They just didn't admit it in front of their peers.
Aye, in case they were laughed at her.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I did a lecture the other week at a college where I took in my... I had like some REM pods, some cat balls, I had my teddy bear, I had my EMF detectors. All this was set up in the class so the students could play with it, you know, could see what it's all about and stuff like that. And in one particular area, it was going crazy. It was going absolutely bonkers. And the students thought it was hilarious. The teacher, not so much. She was quite worried. But then later on, it was reported to me that the building is actually haunted and people have seen stuff. And when you leave the building, when you come out of the door to walk across like a concourse to go into the adjacent building, there's loads of trees and bushes, and I noticed behind them on the wall there's loads of plaques. And I sort of said, what are the plaques for? And just, it's just for teachers that have died, it's for students that have died. And I said, like, these plaques are on your building, and people are seeing stuff in your building, and all the equipment's going crazy in your building. Do you not think maybe that your building is maybe a little bit active? And they just kind of shrugged it off and said, you know, well, people will see what they see, won't they? And that was it, really. But yeah, that was fun to go in and see what it was like in an education environment where you wouldn't normally be able to go in and try stuff like that. But the students loved it.
Do you think maybe they're shrugging off because they're kind of weary?
I think it's because
it is something.
Yeah, I think they have to work in there. So I don't think, you know, it's really funny because the teachers were kind of like, yeah, we don't really think it is. The cleaning ladies were like, yeah, it definitely is. We've seen stuff. On a night, we've seen, when the building's empty, we've seen gentlemen walking around and we've followed them and there's no one there. We've seen them going through locked doors and stuff like that. So I think it's because they work there, they don't want to admit it. They don't want to say, yeah, maybe there is something there. I think they're just trying to play it down to make them feel a little bit better.
But I used to go to college in Glasgow College, and there was 3 or 4 different stories about, you know, what happened there. And there was actually one. It was a group. They were in. It was lift engineers. They were in during the night fixing a lift in Cardonal College. You came out of the lift, and it was just 2 corridors, one at the right, one at the left, and it was straight down. And they were working on the second flare. There was 2 or 3, and one looked up and saw this woman. She described her, a woman in white, wandering down the corridor. And there's other two mates seen it, and the three of them fled during the night. They couldn't get the building because the building was locked, so they had to phone the police, and the police had to let them out, and they wouldn't get back in. They had to get somebody else for their work the next day to go in and collect their tools. And, people are laughing at it when we decided to look into it, and there was newspaper reports, there was police reports that these guys had phoned the police in the middle of the night, terrified they were walking out of this building, with this lady in white, as they described her. So, I mean, there is a lot of activity, but a lot of people just deny it. But again, I think there's a lot of people into the paranormal who will just not admit it. I mean, the other day, just quick story, I pick the wee one up at school every day, and I pick her up to the front office kind of thing. And there's a couple of mothers and fathers sitting there, but there was this big spider on the ceiling the other day, and one of the mothers says, "Look at the size of that thing up there." And I said, "I'll tell you, we would love that." Joke is she's into spiders and all the spooky stuff and the paranormal and that. And she says, "Well, she's so mad. I love the paranormal. I watch all the ghost shows, but I don't tell the man because he'll think I'm a freak. He'll think I'm nuts." I said, "Why not tell me?" It's more accepted these days than a lot of people actually they think. So with all your lectures and your books, do you get recognised walking around Hull? You're kind of local celeb. Well, there's Mike. There's Mike. Yeah, hi, Mike.
Yeah, sometimes. I do get people coming up to me and stuff, which is nice.
And stuff like that,
Yeah, most people are lovely. Most of a lot of the landlords, landladies, management, they'll wave out the window as I walk by, and things like that, and that's nice. And I can go in most places, and most people will recognise me, or they'll say, "Oh, I've read some of your stuff," or "I've seen some of the stuff you've done." So that's nice. People are usually lovely. But yeah, it's interesting as well because when you're walking around, when you've got like a walking tour, I can't stop and talk to people. So when I've got like 30 guests from me, it's always difficult. But then on a few occasions, I remember I was walking down the main street in the city centre, and there was a young couple walking along, and I was walking behind them, and I heard the girl say, "Oh, well, this building here has got this sort of history, blah blah blah." And the guy said, "Where did you learn that?" And she said, "Oh, it was an article in the paper by a guy called Mike Covell." And I've just stood behind, and he sort of turned and looked at me, and then sort of nudged her, and she turned and started giggling. And I said, "All right," and just walked straight past them and left them to it. And then I wrote an article about a door. There's a doorway down the main street. And in the Victorian period, that door would have been the entry to the slums. And it was a place called Bartle's Entry, owned by a guy called Mr. Bartle. And I wrote an article about it in the Hull Daily Mail in 2015. And it came out on the Friday. And on the Saturday, I'd met up with some friends in town. We'd gone for a game of pool and a couple of pints. And we were just walking through the city centre. And there was people stood taking photographs of the door. And it's just a normal door. It's nothing special. It's just a wooden door. Mm-hmm. But the history behind it, obviously, I'd just published this history. So all these people were taking a picture, and we walked by, and my friend nudged me, and he went, "That's all your fault. Like, people are doing that because of you." And I was like, "Well, that's cool," because they've obviously learnt about the door and its significance and things like that. So yeah, that's nice. And it opens up a lot of doors as well. I get a lot of people coming to me that have read an article or a book or seen a TV show or a podcast or a YouTube video, and they'll email or call or text or send me a letter and say, can you come to my venue? Can you come and investigate? So it does open a lot of doors, which is really useful. Just this week, actually, I got a handwritten letter from a gentleman that was experiencing paranormal activity. And I was really shocked because you don't really see, I'll cover his address up, you don't really see handwritten letters anymore.
You don't, they're kind of thing of the past, isn't it?
And it transpired. You can see that side of the letter. No stamp. So it was posted through my door. this guy had come to my house, posted it through my door, and it was a call for help, basically. And I went to see this gentleman, and I went to his house, and he's at the, there was nothing negative or anything like that. But he said, before you go, I want you to take something as a thank you. And he gave me, you can see it, gave me a little
notebook, a photo album.
And it transpires he's a very, very talented artist. So I'll show you my favourite picture from his collection, which is that one. So
that's really good. It's really good.
Yeah. So he's really talented. But then he said to me, he said, my stuff has been put on display. So if you look there real carefully, you'll see, I think that one's...
something castle.
Yeah. That one...
I can make you the word castle. I don't know. I can't make you the other.
Balmoral. Is that not up near you?
Aye, that's up north, aye.
So, that one for Downing Street. That one for Buckingham Palace. So he was getting works put on display by the Queen, the King, the Prime Ministers. They loved his artwork, and they were putting him on display and sending him these wonderful letters saying thank you for, these fantastic artworks and stuff like that. And his house was like a museum. And it was such an amazing experience to go in. And he gave me that as a thank you. And I was blown away by it. And this guy was lovely.
Balmoral is the royal residence up here, Aberdeenshire. And it's also where the Queen passed away a couple of years ago. But I mean, that's amazing. And the fact that you're getting so much, emails, etc., people wanting you to come and see them, investigate their house, their premises, whatever it is. I just think it's amazing, and you've done amazingly well for yourself up to now. I'm just up to now. I'll continue, obviously.
No, I've got some big plans. I've got big plans for the rest of the year. I've been working with a group in Hull called the Silent Book Club, which is wonderful. It's basically just sitting and reading in peace. It's fantastic. And they've booked me for 2 events over Halloween. The first event sold out in 30 seconds, which was just amazing. So they booked me for a second event. 30 seconds, yeah, the tickets were gone in 30 seconds. So they booked me for loads more. We were at a new venue last week. We're going to be doing some stuff in the new venue. And the idea is, traditionally in the history of Hull, people would tell ghost stories at Christmas time. You would gather around a fire. The man of the house would sit with the newspaper and he would tell the family ghost stories. And in Hull, we went through a period where the local newspapers would feature fictional ghost stories every week in a series in the run up to Christmas. And then by the 1890s, these ghost stories became factual. These were ghost stories based on actual locations around the region. So places like Burton Constable, Burton Agnes, Bishop Burton, all these different places where stuff had happened. Paul, trying to think where else, Leven, all these different places. And these stories would get published every month. Mm-hmm. So people would sit and tell their families these ghost stories, and it's a tradition that we lost.
Maybe does it, well, to my knowledge.
Yeah, for years and years and years, I've wanted to bring it back. And I went through a period where I approached numerous pubs, clubs, all sorts to try and bring this back. And there were quite a lot of people that were saying, oh, we'd love to do it. And a couple of years ago, we launched it, and it was all right. It wasn't massively popular. But then it kind of went through a phase where every one I did was sold out. And it was wonderful. And this year we've been to a new venue, which is the property is a really, really old property. It's the oldest commercial property in Hull. It dates back centuries. And it's just reopened as sort of it's a bar, do cocktails, but you can get food and drink in there. And upstairs on the upper floor, it's one of those buildings where the upper floor's jetty out and out and out into the street. But they've got this little room, and it's so cozy. You can get about 20, I think it's about 26 people you can sit in there. It's a very small room, very cozy, very intimate. But the idea is I will turn up and tell ghost stories while people get drunk. And that's it. As simple as that. So we're going to be launching that over the next few weeks. We're just going to launch the one event, and if that sells out, we'll probably launch more. But fingers crossed for that one. And then I've got other stuff going on as well. I've got tours booked in right up until Christmas Eve. I've got tours booked in. I've got Americans coming over it for Christmas to the city. They want to do a history tour with a few ghost stories, and then they want to finish up in pub in a proper typical British pub.
Typical English pub for an English pint, a ghost story. You know what I mean? So just before we wind up, obviously you're a historian. Forgot the blooming word there. What's your personal? I know you say your students pick their sort of favourite and what have you. What's your kind of favourite era of history?
Oh, I love the Victorians.
Oh, I do like say Tudors.
Yeah, no, I love Victorian history. I just love, I love all aspects of it. But a lot Victorian crime and criminals fascinates me. The way that the system worked back then and things like that. I just found it absolutely fascinating. Victorian mourning, the way people mourn for their loved ones and stuff like that. Victorian Christmases. I love to read about Victorian Christmases. Both sides as well. So, I guess like most places, Hull is a tale of two cities, where you had the upper echelons where they would have these big banquets with all types of food and meats and vegetables imported from all over the world. I love reading about that, but on the flip side of that, in Hull we had we had 3 different workhouses. We had a number of orphanages, so there was that aspect where local philanthropists would give money to local orphanages and things like that, so that the children had something to eat on Christmas Day, or they had a present to open, and things like that. And I love reading about stuff like that because it really it grounds you. Do you know what I mean? It brings you crashing back down to earth, knowing that that's the kind of life that they had back then. And there's all these stories. Christmas Day, children from the orphanage on Springbank, which is I'd say it's about a mile. They had to walk to the theatre because the theatre put a performance on for them for free, which sounds lovely. But the actual descriptions in the paper said the children walked down through the streets. Many of them didn't have socks and shoes on. And it's just heartbreaking when you just think, like, just the simple things in life. We take for granted.
People tend to kind of forget that. And even to this day, it still goes on. There's thousands of people out there that just it's a shame, can't afford Christmas, for themselves, for their kids and what have you. Then you get the people who go way over the top. I mean, I'm in a few groups, 70s and 80s groups on Facebook, and a lot of them, especially this time of year, they're all talking about how the way Christmas used to be, back in the 70s even, and the 80s, and some of the toys used to get. They even talk about the wrapping paper. Some people might think it's stupid, but they'll put up pictures of wrapping paper for the 70s and decorations, and you sit there and you think, I remember them. Not that I'm an old man or anything, just emphasise that. And there was one the other day I was reading, and it took me right back to school, is when you used to get the crepe paper. You probably did it as well. and you would, fold it and fold it. And then pull it out. And we used to make our own decorations. And some folk these days, you used to what? You used to make your decorations, because that was half the fun of it,
And I've still got. I know my mum has decorations that I made when I was a kid, but I've got decorations that my kids have made. And I remember my eldest, he's nearly 21. He's at university, but I remember he came home with this tiny ornament that he'd made, and it was really small. It had like a pipe cleaner as a hook. It had loads of glitter on it. And it was one of those things where I think they'd made it from clay, and the clay was supposed to set. To this day, and it must be 15 years later, it's still squishy when you touch it. It still hasn't set. It's really weird. So it don't go on the tree. We've kept it off the tree because, the cat would just demolish it. The cat hates Christmas. I've got a new Christmas tree because every time we get a Christmas tree, he demolishes it. He jumps on it, pulls it over.
We've got 2 cats, and I think it was in our old house. We moved in there, so it's a new build. We moved in there last year, but in our old house, we put up the tree, and every 5 minutes, you would hear it. We just couldn't leave it alone, But we used to make our own stuff, and it made Christmas that much more fun because you knew, even though you were a kid, you knew Christmas was coming.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there was always the downside, the school dances. Go and pick a girl. I'm not picking a girl. You nuts, I'm not moving, And you always knew you were the ugly guy because you were the one they'd never picked. You're sitting at the end of the benches with that, But these days, don't get me right, I still love Christmas, I do.
I enjoy it.
I've had all the lights up for about a week now. 2 weeks.
We put them up in dribs and drabs this week. So my office isn't done, but the other half of the house is. But it's all switched off at the minute because, like I say, everyone's all grown up now. The kids are at university and stuff like that. So they only get switched on for special occasions, which is a little bit sad. But hopefully they'll be coming back soon for Christmas.
I will hopefully. No, the lights are on every night. I kind of went OTT. I think I've got 3,500 lights.
It's not that bad. I think the cat would have a field day. The cat would be chewing all them if I had all them in our house. He once beheaded a nutcracker. I don't know how he did it. I think the nutcracker was hanging off a branch, and he bit the bottom half and ripped it off the branch, and it ripped his head off. And we also had a T-Rex, a Christmas T-Rex, that was all glittery and designed to look festive, and he ripped the leg off the T-Rex. He's bit through about 12 sets of lights. It's a nightmare.
We've got. I was allowed to do outside in the hallway. I put it was the TikTok craze, I must say I did copy people and I put the lights of the ceiling in the hallway. In the living room, I was allowed to put up one of these stick on the wall Christmas trees. That's all I put up in here. Because the cat, as you say, the cats would just, if we put up a tree in here, the cats would probably just go for it. And you'd be constantly picking bits and pieces up. But no, I think Christmas should get back to the way it used to be. But as you say, telling the stories at Christmas, it's something you don't. Even when I was a kid, we'd ever go to our Christmas tradition was going to the Barras Market every Christmas Eve, and we'd be there till maybe 22, quarter to midnight, because all the prices kind of tumbled the closer it got to midnight. And I still do it. We go up every. I missed it for a couple of years because it kind of died a death. There was nothing, but it's starting over the last 3, maybe 4 years. It's starting to come alive again. So we still go Christmas Eve. We take a wee drive up to the bar. It's one of these things. No doubt you get something that your parents done when you was a kid, and you knew it was Christmas Eve because you were going to the bars.
Yeah.
You knew Santa was on his way, so he was about somewhere, and you'd buy a load of crap, I'd spend 30, 40, £50 on crap that you're never going to use, but you buy it because you're there. No doubt you do the same. You know, I think everybody's guilty. You know, to buy a windmill or something like that. You know, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm going to do it, but you know, I bought it, so it's Christmas. I'll find some, you know, 6 months later, still sitting in the cupboard. You know what I mean? But I'll keep a hold of you. I'm going to wind it up there. So I just realised the time. I'll keep a hold of you because you gave me an idea. I want to just throw your way. So I'll keep a hold of you after we came off. So where can people find you? I know they can find you in Hull. Everywhere in Hull.
Amazing Hull Tours on Facebook, which is our Facebook page. Or just look for me at Mike Covell, and you'll find me all over the place.
He's everywhere, folks. You realise, seriously, this guy's amazing. Now, I'm not saying that because he's on. He is, the stuff that this guy's done today is just, it'll blow your cheeks off, basically. And I'm not talking about these ones. You know what I mean? So that's it. So a big thanks to Mike for coming in. You will be seeing him again, by the way. There's not going to be such a big gap. But we're going to call it a night. We're back on tomorrow night with Hollywood Ghost Hunter and Stuntman Rick McCallum. So we'll be catching up with him. But again, big thanks to Mike. Big thanks for watching, folks. And enjoy the rest of your evening. And try and stay warm. Because with -4 or 5 up here now. So wherever you're, get the heating on or get the wool. That's why I've got a hoodie on. Get the hoodie on. All right, folks. So talk to you all soon. Bye. Bye.
Cheers.